Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, so the issue is that for the sake of efficiency and cost reduction and all that, we've moved over to just-in-time production in a lot of different sectors, especially the major manufacturing sectors. And so what that means is that countries and companies tend not to hold tremendous stockpiles, as a matter of course, of the raw materials that they need to function, basically, because the assumption is that with logistics being as advanced as they are and communication being as advanced as it is, we do not face supply shortfalls at any particular point, and we can move things around so quickly that you can have what you need as soon as you need it, pretty much. Instead of having the large warehouses full of whatever raw materials and intermediate goods are required for manufacturing, instead everybody just ships things around as and when they need them. In normal times, this is all well and good. We get more land usage, reduced costs, reduced prices. Everything's wonderful until something like this comes along and starts to disrupt all of those networks. And so that means for a lot of this manufacturing, companies are finding either that they need to stock up in whatever way that they can, but considering this snuck up on us, there hasn't been that much time to do that, or shut down, basically. And I think investors have basically seen this. They've sort of foreseen what the consequences of this are going to be down the line, and they are, well, investing accordingly. But there's a little bit more to it than that, even, because that's one factor, but there's also just the raw factor of, okay, now that the disease has spread into all of these other different countries, we're seeing shutdowns in major industrial areas. So in particular, Lombardy. Lombardy has been effectively shut down for, what are we talking, 2 weeks now? Are we up to 3?
I'm
That
not
is
quite sure
that
how
is
long it's been going on, but it's at least 2 weeks for Italy,
yeah.
being at a genuine crisis point where police are going around and shutting the country down in some areas.
Well, here's the issue. One of many. Lombardy is one of the main economic areas of Italy. And so, although it's not quite been, again, I think we mentioned this last time, but the figures are going to take quite a while to go through, but we are almost certainly in recession across Europe now, if not pretty much globally, just because of this slowdown that's resulted from everybody having to be at home. This represents an enormous contraction in the capacity of the economy, but at the same time, everybody's going out and panic buying because nobody wants to be left without food if it's suddenly decided that we're out absolutely on lockdown and nobody is allowed to go and pick up any kind of goods. Or, like I said, if there are any disruptions in the logistics networks which are providing food for everyone, well, nobody wants to be the one that's stuck without any kind of food and has to go begging or worse. So, put those two things together.
Right now, we are due some kind of serious collapse. First, in the economic market, as in paradigm changing. Perhaps some new leaders coming from this in financial terms and whatnot. But as in also perhaps some kind of martial law or some kind of civil unrest, or civil unrest leading to martial law or preemptive martial law in Europe somewhere.
There's been talk of that in France. So a lot of people are speculating that Macron might be about to invoke some pretty serious executive powers in order to contain the situation. This is especially interesting considering a lot of the migrant populations seem to be in flagrant disregard of the quarantine measures that have been put in place. So in particular, there was a riot in Lyon, I believe.
Yeah, there was just the video posted in our network of the truck attack. People are going nuts, or even straight up just... Who knows what the dispute is there, right? But as you say, there are foreign migrants and riotous, unhappy citizens of France out there on the street, and rightfully so. I think many people in Europe feel what the protesters feel and felt during the protests in France not so long ago, last year, right? Was it 2019 that it really did pick up and start, or did it start at the end of 2018?
I think it might be the end of 2018 because they've been going for over a year now.
Right, okay, yeah. So I suppose it's just the reporting of these things that gets reframed as well, because there's still protests in Hong Kong now. It's just they are very muted because of the, well, I imagine right this moment they are bad because of the virus, right? And yeah, please take us on from here. I don't want to derail you. Go ahead, sir.
Well, so where I was going with all the economics talk is that we have a name for what happens if you face a severe reduction in capacity, combined with, well, what looks to be inflation based on a lot of panic buying, a sharp increase in short-term demand, and that name is stagflation. I've sent you a link regarding that just to explain what it is briefly. But effectively, it's in the name.
On my terminal screen now, we have Investopedia.com, stagflation, under the category of economics and macroeconomics. What is stagflation? Stagflation is a condition of slow economic growth and relatively high unemployment or economic stagnation, accompanied by rising prices or inflation.
Yes. So the last time that we saw this phenomenon, well, widespread, I suppose, yeah, widespread would be the way of putting it, would be in the 70s. And of course, the late 70s, early 80s coincides with what we would generally recognize as a pretty significant paradigm shift, as you spoke about earlier. So yes, I think something's coming down the line if my prediction is correct here, that what we're looking at is effectively stagflation that has been basically unrecorded so far, just because it takes a few months for all of this kind of stuff to actually cycle through the relevant analytical.
It can't be immediate. It has to go out. And I mean, now is such a quick and reactive time, but it's still going to take weeks, months before the full cycles of all the gears in the economic machine have turned in relation to each other.
Yeah. So recording stuff in real time like this is a little bit difficult. But what I suspect that we're going to see is, because of this sharp increase in immediate demand, especially for some of these consumer goods, and just food, disposable medical equipment, and all of that kind of thing, all the government spending that's happening as well. Let's remember. So governments all over the place are just throwing money at the issue, left, right, and center. Not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. People need help, but it is what it is. Meanwhile, all of those people who are at home would ordinarily be in the workforce. All of these factories are either suspending production temporarily, shutting down outright until further notice. Generally, just not. People aren't at work. A lot of people aren't at work. A lot of people aren't actually contributing economically. Therefore, what we're seeing is a de facto unemployment, widespread, more widespread than anything that was seen in the 70s, I would say, probably. And so what we're going to see, I would say, going forward is possibly a few months of pretty severe inflation, maybe beyond the targets of most economies, because they like to have a little bit of inflation to kind of keep things ticking along, keep prices on the increase, and keep people encouraged to spend. But I think we're probably going to blow that out, at least for a short period, and suffer recessions, as I said. And this is something which is often described as a nightmare for economists, because and policymakers, because there is no quick fix. If you want to avert the problem of the stagnation, then you need to. Conventional wisdom says you need to pump more money into the economy to get things going, but that just increases the inflation further, and so you're creating more problems for yourself on that side. But if you want to rein in the inflation, then conversely you need to slow down the spending, but that just makes the unemployment and the stagnation worse.
Boys at the Fed must have their knickers in a twist.
Yes, I'm sure people who are much more tied into these things than I are having similar conversations. And
Stock
probably
sound of
panicking.
Champagne bottle popping.
So yes, we may see a severe and significant uptick of, let's say, heterodox economics coming out of these troubles, because I mean, this is the same thing that was experienced under the sort of Keynesian consensus, particularly in the UK. I can speak more comfortably from a UK perspective. Is that the consensus at the time was that the Keynesian models that had been used during the post-war consensus did not have a tool available to deal with the stagflation. It was perceived as being basically impossible under their models, and so that's part of what discredited them, both in the public eye and in the eyes of the practitioners. We may see a similar thing now, because it's not a problem that any particular model or economic model has a clear fix for.
And does this not make 4-year, 5-year based term democracy just such a joke as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Just to poke holes in democracy wherever is possible, right? This
you can always
system is just unable to keep up with this.
Well, you can see that problem probably most acutely, and so this is part of the whole sort of neoliberal package. But you can see it with the monetary policy as well, where monetary policy has effectively, and people are admitting this now, very important people, that you should be alarmed that they're saying this. We've effectively run out of monetary policy tools. Everything is being thrown at the wall now, and if something else were to be added on top, like the stagflation that I'm talking about, there is nothing left in the arsenal of monetary policy. There would need to be new answers at that point, because otherwise we'd have to sit back and just watch it happen. That is an answer in itself, but I don't think that's...
Rounds 5, 5, 6. Are you stocked with beans and protein? Have you got some starch in the freezer? Now would be a good time to be stocked.
Yes. Unfortunately, that compounds the problem. There is no easy answer here.
But if all the drones are going to buy and there's going to be a shortfall, I mean, most of us live as... What did you call that mode of production that's a little bit similar and kind of synergizes with planned obsolescence?
Just in time.
Yeah, just in time.
What you're referring to?
Yeah, yes, that's right. It explains itself, right? If everything's just in time, made, on demand, and you run it as thin and as close to the wire, so you've got as fluid an operation, as low cost an operation as possible, this kind of thing, and well, as you've explained very clearly, it's a big old mess. And the planned obsolescence method now is, imagine what this is going to do to smartphones now. Are they going to take a different strategy in what they release next? Are they going to try and... Because we could see currencies literally drop massively in value, and then afterwards, if you've had places disproportionately affected, right, different currencies will have better buying power in the future. So you could see new leaders, or at least people standing on the shit pile a little higher than other people, right?
Well, this links quite well to a problem that's been unfolding, and something that a lot more people are paying attention to more recently. So this is something that was a big part of Trump's campaign and his whole, I suppose, package of policy proposals. The issue of manufacturing going abroad. Because although I haven't been able to find that much hard data on it to show, there have been reports of effectively China trying to throw its geopolitical, or rather geoeconomic, let's say, weight around, based on the fact that a lot of they recognize that a lot of power is held in the position of being able to dictate in a time of crisis where resources go. So they can ignore the normal operating procedure of, perhaps it's a Western company that's operating manufacturing in China. China can just say, we're not going to release these goods, even though you technically own them.
Yeah, because in that that no space, that void space between states where the so-called international law exists, people just, as they do in real life, choose to obey it or don't, right? And who is the bully to tell China what to do in Asia, let alone in China itself, right? Nobody is above them, really.
Well, this is the point. So if reports are to be believed, this is the kind of thing that they are indulging in now. Effectively, they are throwing their weight around on the basis of international reliance on China's part in the supply chain. Effectively,
Let us
so
hope
masks.
the paper tiger goes up in smoke now. If everybody reorganizes and reestablishes, perhaps not in their homeland, but perhaps in Europe relies on Europe, perhaps America continues to work with Europe, in the traditional Western sense, right? Uh, Perhaps things go a bit more regional, or even better, you can have everything produced with an ecological self-reliance and preserving nature, or at least a human garden that we call nature in whatever comes next for our country, but also be ready to actually produce our own goods and only have what we really need and keep everything else focused on innovation and furthering of our nation, people, and so forth.
Yes, so all of that would be lovely. However,
However,
how,
sorry.
however, the reality is that autarky in within sort of national state boundaries as we have them established at the moment it's a very difficult prospect. So although we probably won't see a purer form or the purest form of what you're describing, what we might see, and what I hope we do see, is a movement towards it.
Yes.
So that does mean, as you sort of alluded to, perhaps more of the components for things like phones are going to be produced domestically, or at the very least, because we do have a model of this kind of thing in the past, the idea of an economic sphere, or kind of like a I don't know. Let's just put it in the Anglo context: a commonwealth of nations within which you have a common defense policy of a sort. In the past, it doesn't necessarily have to be what happens going forward, but let's just roll with it. Supply chains integrated within this
confederation.
Well, yes, possibly, but the core point being that you have these multiple spheres which are all self-contained, relatively speaking, economic spheres which can compete with one another and are self-sufficient within the context of the sphere. So you don't have a situation where one country can be the sole producer of X good or X raw material where possible for the entire world, because that means that you remove that single point of failure for the entire global economy. At least, worst case scenario, let's say the Francophone empire, or the Francophone neo-empire is facing a shortfall in some capacity. They can at least, worst case scenario, rely on being able to produce it, perhaps at a premium, like a markup from the Anglophone empire, neo-empire. This is a model that I think there might be some renewed interest in, and who knows, maybe I'll do some more writing on it and thinking on it myself. But
I think you are onto something. But what I think will happen is you will see a lot of natural synergy with these previously, imperially connected countries, Commonwealth countries, so forth. Also, obviously, I would include the United States as a big part of the Western story derived from the UK and, other parts of Europe. So, yeah, I totally think that this is going to occur. But at the same time, I think we are going to have to see a lot of, if the trend is towards move away from the reliance on China in the West and so forth, when they realize that they are actually facing competition, not just cheaper wares. And, they're being clubbed around the head with China's geopolitical, geo-economic weight, as you put it. I feel like we are going to see a lot of new things coming up, but here's what came to me. That's the point I wanted to say. How good would it be to see something like a British smartphone company making something, producing all of their goods within the UK, and putting that stuff out there. One really cool, small and indie piece of tech that I think has earned international repute, and when you hear it's from the UK, you know it's going to have technical quality, is the Raspberry Pi, right? That is a great little piece of tech. If you've ever used a Raspberry Pi for its day, such an innovative little thing. Imagine what a focused British country could do in terms of innovating with technology now. It'd be great to see people starting these kinds of things up.
Well, this is the thing, and let's. So yes, I would love to see more of that kind of thing, and it's a bit of a shame, really, that we have gone for the past, what is it now, 40 or so years down this route of complete global interconnectivity and free trade between the entire planet, effectively. Sure, we've got things slightly cheaper, but in return, we get to have all of our heavy industries taken out. So let's say if we need steel pressingly, then unfortunately we're going to have to import it. And if we can't import it, then well, I guess we're screwed. But I think people are waking up to this, or that there is gradually a movement. I won't put it in populist terms, but I think there's going to be a gradual movement towards this recognition of geoeconomics as a discipline, and a recognition of the political and power-based dimension of these economic trends. And so I think we're going to see a movement away from global free trade. It might not be a movement away from free trade totally, but it'll be free trade with caveats. Free trade with an asterisk, saying we're going to pay a bit more attention to what strategic industries there might be in our country, and we're going to pay a bit more attention to what is necessary in times of crisis. So even if we have to scale things up to be able to meet the capacity requirements in our economy, at least we have a basis to do that, rather than just saying, okay, anything. It's a free for all. You can take whatever. We're just going for pure economic efficiency. I think we might be witnessing the death of that paradigm.
I think that would be a welcome reprieve. I have seen nothing but the slow, gradual decline of an already collapsed cultural and economic system that just ever divides itself into smaller and smaller slices of the pie. It is a market system that is contending with declining value, or near the bottom at least anyway. The purchasing power of people has always seemed to be, from my background, obviously I'm speaking here, not in economic terms, it has always been very stagnant in the north of England, and even those who do well, what they do is they now move to London, and they must live in London if they are going to have anything that they consider worthy of a life with career prospects and so forth. But of course, in our generation, it is now so swollen with competition from fellow millennials, right, that they find themselves sitting in an office that mimics their classroom, with their peers all sitting around rotting in this office, looking just towards the boss's office and waiting for the clock to tick by as I shan't even describe the life of the wagey, right? But whether it's office or labour, or maybe not so much labour, because building things seems to reward people quite well, and worthily so, But people who work with very intangible, more human being than human animal kind of concepts, they seem to have really burnt themselves out, where I even feel the normies now are a little bit accelerationist in some streak, right?
I'm not sure. I can't speak from experience.
God damn it! I hope I'm right.
Yeah, but what I can say is that there is an element to which what I'm describing on the macro scale could affect what you're talking about on the micro scale, because some of what you're describing there is a product of the relentless drive towards efficiency. And so if we see an easing off, if we recognize that there's more of a trade-off that's taking place in exchange for that efficiency, and we start to question that trade-off, then what we might see is a reduction in the division of labor and the extreme specialization that we experience. Because I can't even think of what the most corporate, pointless position title might be, but I'm sure everybody's got something in their head as to what that might be. Some let's go derogatory. Some paper pushing job that doesn't seem to have any real tangible meaning or benefit, and you never see an end product of any particular kind, and you can barely perceive how you're changing much of anything, and you just do it because you need a job and you like the promotion prospects. But that over specialization that draws people out of the wider picture of what they're doing and takes away from the meaning that people get from work. We might see a reduction of that if like I said, if efficiency is seen as more of a trade-off than it currently is.
I hope so. Revolt against the modern world, return to nature, embrace tradition. How many things can I slap into this GIMP file? Right, my friend,
there's a lot of
seconds become minutes, and we have just consumed almost 26 minutes of our lives. How are you feeling right now? Would you like those 26 minutes back? I think they were well spent, but would you like to round something off here? We've got another tab here, I believe.
Yes. There was one other thing I was going to cover.
I believe it's Chinese medical equipment.
We've covered that. There's not much else to say. I don't think,
to
really,
round
except
that one off, just because I brought it in, right? It's almost as if China's interest was to release the virus, recover from it, and then very suddenly have a monopoly on medical devices. I mean, where do we produce this stuff? Why, it's in China, isn't it? It's all produced in China, our medical equipment. And now they get to decide who gets
you could look at it
and what the price is. Well played, Chang.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's take this in a slightly different direction then, because we can circle this likewise back around to some of the other things that we were talking about. So even if there wasn't a planned element to this, or at least not planned insofar as it's
that's the
meticulously
effect.
planned.
Yeah.
The effect is broadly the same. So it could just be as simple as what we acknowledge of the Chinese efficiency, well, not efficiency, low cost of manufacturing, and all of the lovely benefits that come with manufacturing in China. That's just led to an exponential increase in the amount of manufacturing that's done there, including medical devices. So what that means is, at a time like this, China has a very dominant position in just in terms of raw power. As we said, this comes back to the geoeconomics of the whole situation, but it does point to something else that's a little bit more systemic to the Chinese system, because they are coming at it from a perspective of long-term planning. They know what they're doing, and they've set up plans that go decades, and perhaps even they got a century-long plan that I haven't encountered, but based on their government model and their model of governance and policy, it's entirely possible, and they could carry it out. This is just not something that we are capable of carrying out with sort of Western liberal democracies, and so this is something that we might likewise recognize a severe economic shortcoming in, because if we do start moving towards more protectionist or policy / government-driven models of economic growth, where we are considering the geoeconomic consequences of decisions as well as their raw economic efficiency benefit, then we're going to have systems, or at the very least countries that have systems which can conduct this kind of long-term planning are going to gain disproportionate advantage. And so just on that basis alone, we'll start seeing more planning-based economies, or planning-based governments, and perhaps a movement away from this, thinking in increments of 4 or 5 years, because that's the only relevant increment to the politician in question.
Yes, the ideological frameworks that hold up democracy in its current short term, really, framework, they seem more and more pointless, especially when other countries, especially the world's giant factory, right, isn't playing by the same rules and is able to basically outplay you by playing the long game. This has been a well-known aspect of China for a very long time. The difference is that now China owns, well, produces most of the world's goods, right? And so this is all they have to do is sit there and watch how the world markets perform, and anytime they make a correct call, you will be able to see them reap the benefits of it more clearly, because this stuff is passed out through corruption within the government, and to people that they want to select as their friends, in a way that the free trade open West cannot really counter at all. If one of the major players is playing the long game and everybody else is on their own tiny factionalized little teams, people are not united. These these individualists get trumped by the collectivists.
Yep, nothing particularly to add. There's one thing that I would say though. Well, actually, no. Let's round off that point first, because so to I spoke a lot in what is possibly too abstracted terms. So let's just say it like it is. We might be seeing, as has already been observed, a rise in authoritarianism and a movement away from liberal democracy.
Indeed. And we have seen nothing but the retraction of liberty in a British sense, in an American sense. The Constitution is wavered. I believe there are some places in the United States that now have compulsory quarantine, not just saying stay home, but people being directed by state agents, police officers and whatnot, to go home, in a country that is supposed to have a constitution and the First and Second Amendment, right? Do the state get to quarantine you in times of such disease, or perceived disease at this time? Whatever happens from here, once state muscles are exercised, they are strengthened, and they never seem to lose their gains, right?
Exactly, and this may be something that sticks in the public consciousness for a long time to come. And so with that in mind, the question of what if there's another coronavirus may be on a lot of lips.
Yeah, and will the virus be gone after this year? It's very unlikely. Thank you very much for this. That was a great little take, and let's see how we go from this absolute shitstorm.
Yeah, let's see what happens.
Thank you, friend.